Over the 25 years we've had LEGO Star Wars, we've received sets from all 11 Star Wars movies. Some of those movies are obviously better than others, but what about the sets? How do they measure up against each other? Today I'm going to be ranking the Star Wars movies purely based on how good I think the sets are. This means it doesn't matter how mid a movie was. If the sets are great, then it's getting ranked high. That being said, there are going to be a lot of surprises on this, so before the video starts, let me know which movie has the best sets in the comment section down below. Coming in at last place, to probably no one's surprise, is Solo. Now let me just say, I think there are definitely highlights in all movies' sets. For example, I think it's safe to say Solo definitely gave us the best TIE fighter ever, with an awesome minifig selection. And the Kessel Run Falcon, even with the old gaps between the panels, I think is a really cool set. Overall, the other sets are pretty good, but mostly forgettable in my opinion, kinda like the movie. The AT Hauler and the Convex Transport are pretty unique, but honestly aren't that special. I'll say, this movie gives us 2 really clean speeders, 3 if you include the awesome battle pack. Officially in the top 10, next we have The Force Awakens. Even though according to Bricklink this movie has the most sets out of any modern Disney movie, I think that again, there aren't that many standouts. While there are some clean builds for sure, such as the Special Forces TIE Fighter, which looks amazing, the black and red and grey color scheme, and also the First Order Transporter, they're nothing too crazy. Poe's X-Wing is also pretty cool, and the other X-Wing, the Resistance X-Wing fighter, is my personal favorite. I'm not really sure why, I think it just reminds me of the 501st Legion with the blue and the grey color scheme. Honestly, I think this just beats out Solo because of the quantity of the sets, but boy are there some mediocre and forgettable ones. Like the Jakku Quad Jumper literally only appeared for one scene and got a whole set. We also got some battle packs which were okay I guess, like the First Order battle pack only having 2 stormtroopers and then some like random black guys for some reason. The Resistance counterpart was also boring, but the First Order Transport Speeder battle pack was actually pretty good. So this movie definitely did produce some good, and hey, it's the best sequel, and honestly one of my favorite Star Wars movies to rewatch. Surprisingly to some people, Rise of Skywalker is not in last, not in second last, but here at number 9. It was honestly really hard to pick between these last 3, so if you guys think that these should be rearranged, then you're probably right. The reason this movie didn't come in last is because there are definitely some sleepers and borderline perfect sets here. Whether you like this movie or not, you have to admit it. The Kylo Ren shuttle is pretty badass, and LEGO made a damn near perfect representation here, especially compared to Episode 7's, which was not at all accurate and the wrong color. Also, this movie finally gave us a Millennium Falcon with no gaps in between the panels, and probably aside from the figure selection, which is accurate to this movie, this has to be like one of the best playscale models of this set. I also like the Resistance Y-Wing, the X-Wing, and the A-Wing. They're pretty flawless builds. Lastly, the Knights of Ren transport ship is a highlight for me personally. Even though the build could have been bigger, I love the black color scheme so much, and overall this movie only had 11 sets made, but the quality really stood out to me, so you could definitely tell the design team put a lot of effort into these and it really showed. Now before we get into this next pick, I understand you're probably wondering where some Disney movies are and why they haven't showed up. I understand why my next pick is going to be a scorching hot take, but I feel like honestly, these next 3 spots can also be rearranged between number 8, 7, and 6. With that being said, unfortunately I hate to do it, but at number 8 is going to be The Phantom Menace.
You suck!
Now listen. I looked at this movie sets, and I looked at the next movie sets. And let me specify again, this is not a movie ranking, but a set ranking. And while I don't want to give away the next spot, I do want to back up why I have The Phantom Menace this low. First of all, there are almost no modern highlights. All the best sets from this movie come from the late 2000s or the early 2010s. We have started getting a bit more over the last couple of years with the Sith Infiltrator and some diorama sets, but I just don't think there are that many highlights. However, I do have it this high for a reason. There are definitely some awesome sets we got in the past, like the 2007 MTT, the Republic Cruiser, and Anakin and Sebulba's Pod Racers. Now these 3 are some of the most wanted sets on my personal list, and are undoubtedly awesome. As much love as the prequels have rightfully gotten in the last decade, I think that this movie isn't that great of a movie to get sets from. There aren't really any sets that blow my mind away. And the way I decided on it being this low at number 8 is by thinking of the highs of the sets, and if I had to delete one movie's sets, which would it be? With that being said, yes, I am taking at number 7 The Last Jedi over The Phantom Menace. Again, before I start getting chased with pitchforks and torches, I think this is the worst Star Wars movie. I don't hate it like some people do, but it's my least favorite to rewatch because I just think it's kind of boring. That being said, this movie had some amazing scenes and ships to make sets from. The First Order Star Destroyer was an awesome display piece, and is in my opinion a top 2 sequel set, behind Kylo Ren's shuttle. Speaking of, in this wave we also got Kylo Ren's TIE Fighter, and I must say he has a great taste, because the black and red never miss. The Resistance Bomber is another great set that I actually didn't like initially. However, when I got it in hand, the build was super clean and had a great bomb dropping play feature, which I loved. The First Order Heavy Assault Walker is also another great set, which I would say is a top 5 sequel set from one of my favorite scenes where Luke faces off against Kylo Ren to let the Resistance get away. The reason I like this movie set so much is because unlike other movies, I think the small sets are also really good. The First Order Heavy Scout Walker is actually a really good set even though it wasn't in the movie. The Resistance Transport Pod, Defense on Crate, and Praetorian Guard Battle Pack are other highlights to me because they're all just really clean. Yes, the First Order ATST isn't a very exciting set, but the highs are too high for me to ignore, and in terms of sets, this movie is very consistent with quality and very accurate. Finally, at number 6 we have our last Disney Star Wars movie, which is also coincidentally the most loved of them all, so it's only right that they got the sets right. Believe it or not, I almost put The Last Jedi above this, but I think at that point I would be banished from the community, so I can't be having that. The real reason I put it this high is because we got some of the greatest Star Wars sets of all time in this movie, Rogue One. First of all, the Darth Vader's castle has got to have the most aura out of any LEGO Star Wars set. It's so unique and we've never gotten anything else like it, so 10 out of 10. We also get the best Y-Wing that's not UCS, and my personal favorite letter wing ship, if you want to call it that, which is the U-Wing, which is amazing. I'm really looking forward to seeing how the new one measures up. And that's not all for great sets though. We still have Krennic Shuttle, the Imperial Assault Hover Tank, and the TIE Striker, which are all amazing. I personally regret not getting Krennic Shuttle so much when it first came out, but hey, one can only hope. We also got our arguably top 3 battle pack of all time in this wave, with the Imperial Trooper Battle Pack, which has 2 Stormtroopers, 2 Death Troopers, and a Walker build. The build isn't much, but the figure selection is just perfect, which is what makes it so great. Lastly, what really pushed this wave up for me is the addition of unique Rebel figures throughout the whole wave. Jyn Erso, Cassian Andor, Baze Malbus, Chirrut, and Wei are all highlights, and we got a lot of great quality figures like that in pretty much every set, which is not something we see a lot in LEGO Star Wars, so definitely shout out to the figure designers for that. We're finally in the top 5, which I think if we put the order aside, we can all agree these 5 movies deserve to be in here somewhere. At the number 5 spot, I have to put Attack of the Clones. Over the last few years, a lot of people were rightfully complaining that Attack of the Clones had barely any sets compared to the rest of the prequels and movies in general. This is definitely justified, because including foil packs and special sets like 3-in-1s, we only have 28 sets. But make no mistakes, those are 28 strong sets. Most of these sets come from the Battle of Geonosis, with the coveted Republic gunship and ATT being all-time highlights not for just this movie, but for LEGO Star Wars as a whole. These sets are so iconic, and even though we've gotten them kind of remade now, it was really crazy trying to get these in 2020 when Clone Wars came back and everyone wanted them. The original 2002 sets from this wave are also low-key amazing. Jango Fett's Slave 1, the OG gunship and ATT, the Bounty Hunter Pursuits are all amazing sets that have actually aged really well. But in my opinion, what really elevates this movie's sets is it actually having a good UCS set, even if there are just 2. The UCS Gunships is one of my favorite UCS sets in my collection, and even though their figures were a bit disappointing, that's not why people buy UCS sets, and that controversy was dumb. Also, the UCS Obi-Wan Kenobi Starfighter, which exists, kind of like the Naboo Starfighter, there's not really much it brings to the table, it's just kind of there. I think that in the future, I hope to see LEGO expanding this movie's range of sets from beyond just Geonosis, because there's a lot of Camino and Coruscant sets that could still be made. Unfortunately, at number 4, while it is a great and arguably the best Star Wars movie to many people, including myself, Revenge of the Sith will not be cracking the top 3. I can't lie, I was a bit disappointed looking at the Revenge of the Sith sets. While it definitely deserves the number 4 spot, there aren't any UCS sets, and a lot of the great Clone Wars era sets technically fall under the TV show and not actually Revenge of the Sith. Part of me even thinks this is too high because I could definitely see Episode 2 overtaking it if it had more sets, but I think that Revenge of the Sith has some amazing playsets to make up for this. Almost every major battle we see is represented thoroughly. We've had plenty of Anakin and Obi-Wan starfighters from the Battle of Coruscant, we got sets from Utapau, and we have surprisingly a lot of Kashyyyk sets, as well as some good Mustafar builds. I don't have a lot to say about this movie surprisingly, except that it's a great movie that had a lot of its potential sets stolen by the Clone Wars, which is why I have to give it some pity points. I know that's kind of unfair, but even the UCS Venator is technically a Clone Wars set. Besides Revenge of the Sith influence on Clone Wars sets, some highlights include Palpatine's Arrest, the 2 clone turbo tanks we've gotten from this movie, Palpatine's Shuttle, Utapau Troopers Battle Pack, and the ATAP Walkers. Overall, I think this is arguably the most thorough coverage of a movie that LEGO has done, as almost every planet and battle has gotten or will get a set in the near future, which is a lot. Lastly, in the top 3, we have the original trilogy movies. This mainly came down to who has the best UCS sets, and it was really hard to choose between number 1 and 2. In third place, I had to go with Return of the Jedi, because while I think it might be an unpopular opinion, I don't think there are that many sets that are too mind-blowing from this movie. The best sets are all old sets like the UCS Imperial Shuttle and the Death Star 2. Recently, we did get the UCS Javel Sail Barge, but honestly, I never found that set to be that interesting as a UCS model. It doesn't have the same wow factor as some of these other massive UCS sets. I think that as time goes on, this has potential to move up in the rankings. Just like the Ewok Village give me hope that LEGO will come back to this movie and give us more modern UCS sets like a Battle of Endor, because they did a great job with the UCS A-Wing a couple years back. A new Imperial Shuttle and UCS Death Star 2 would also be amazing, and I also might be in the minority, but I've always wanted another UCS B-Wing because I really need it for my Rebel fleet. I think this movie has really good UCS potential that LEGO hasn't fully capitalized on, because at the end of the day, they only have so many UCS slots per year. Hopefully the UCS ATSD coming out this year will be a step in the right direction though. Choosing between episode 4 and 5 for the number 1 spot was insanely difficult. I mainly had to go based off UCS sets because they're just that good, and it really came down to the wire. I originally had these flipped around, but I did eventually change my mind. Our runner-up is A New Hope, the one that started it all. This movie has so many iconic sets. Before I get into the UCS sets, which obviously played a huge part in it being second place, I do want to give a shout out to this movie's playsets quickly, because over the years we've gotten a really thorough coverage of a lot of scenes. My favorite's got to be the X-Wing from 2018, which is probably the best version we've gotten. The new Yavin 4, which I really like for some reason, even though it was kind of disappointing and it is kind of hated, I still like it. The many Star Destroyers we've gotten, and who could forget the Luke's Land Speeders, which are honestly a case for number 1. For UCS sets, we have the original UCS Falcon, which is honestly aged incredibly, the UCS Imperial Star Destroyers, the Death Star, and a lot of smaller UCS ships such as the X-Wing, the Y-Wing, and who could forget the UCS Luke's Land Speeder, perhaps the greatest set of them all. Originally, I did have this at number 1, but after careful consideration, I had to make a change. That means that at number 1, we have The Empire Strikes Back. It was insanely hard trying to choose between this and A New Hope. I think that honestly could go either way, and I had to make a hard call, but the UCS sets really stuck out for me here. I do want to shout out the Playscale sets first. I think some of the best ones are the AT-AT from 2020, the Slave one from 2019, and the infamous Cloud City set from 2003. What really made this movie come first for me was the amount of massive UCS sets it has. The one-of-a-kind Super Star Destroyer, the UCS AT-AT, and the UCS Falcon are all fan favorites and can all be called top 10 sets of all time. This is without even starting on other awesome UCS models we've gotten from this movie, like the goated Slave 1 and Snowspeeder, which were some of my first UCS sets. I also really like the Master Builder series Cloud City, and I really regret not being able to get it because that set is super underrated. This movie has a lot of sets that are amazing, and I definitely missed a couple highlights, but that can honestly be said for all of these movies. Anyway, let me know what sets I forgot to mention and what you agree with and disagree with in the comments of this whole list. I hope I didn't make too many people angry, but do let me know your opinion. Peace.